Thank you, folks. Important film that requires a conversation, and who better to lead this than our good friend Libby Lenkinski from the New Israel Fund, in conversation with the director, Michel Weits, who you all know very well by now. Please join us up here. I also want to give a shout out to our co-sponsors for this event, Doc NYC, who co-presented this event. And also let you know, as they get settled, that for those of you interested in seeing more Other Israel, of course, we're here all week. Let It Be Morning, our opening night film that was sold out. We'll have a special private screening here at 7 p.m. You're all welcome to join and stay after the conversation. Libby, over to you.
Thank you, Yitzi. I want to pause for 1 second and just say what a joy it is to be back here in person at Other Israel Film Festival. Last time I sat on this stage was 2 years ago. I was sitting next to Leah Tzemel and Dov Chanin. It feels like simultaneously 5 seconds ago and like a billion years ago. So I'm Libby from New Israel Fund. It's nice to see so many familiar faces and some new faces. And I'm moderating today on behalf of Yes NIF, where I work, but also other Progressive Israel Network groups who co-sponsored today's screening: Americans for Peace Now, Amenu, Hashomeret Seir North America, which I am also a fourth-generation alumni of, J Street, New Israel Fund, Partners for Progressive Israel, and Trua. Michal, hi.
Hey.
So this is my second time seeing the film, and I have to tell you that it was really different for me the second time.
Really?
Yes. I saw something very different in it, and I think the first time I was in some ways struck by our parallel stories. And you don't know this, but so my grandfather, also named Yosef, died as a soldier in 1948. And so the whole time that I saw the film the first time, I was thinking, it felt like it was speaking to me directly. But you didn't make the film for me directly because we didn't know each other when you made this film. So I wanted to start by asking, who did you make this film for? Who is this film for?
Well, I'm dedicating the film at the end credits to my daughter. She's 1.5 years old. But I guess it's also for her, but I'm dedicating the film, and I made the film for the younger generation, especially for the younger generation in Israel and Palestinian Israelis, and the younger generation here in the United States, Canada, Europe. I think for me it was a big surprise to find out a big piece of history that I wasn't aware of. We are not learning this piece of history at school, and I think we should. It's our history, and it's not only a piece of long ago history, it's our future. We are living in an unending conflict, and we're paying the price every day. So I think we have to know our past and our history in order to one day fix the situation and make a good future for our children, for my children. So I'm aiming for the younger generation. If you're not learning this stuff in school, so I've made a film for you that you can watch.
And what are you hoping that people will take out of this film? What are you hoping that we will do? I mean, I know that the film was screened many, many times in Israel. I'm very curious what you're hoping for in those screenings. And now you're here, and we're so honored to be among the first to see this film here. What are you hoping that people will do with this new perspective on the history?
First of all, I think that I wish people to ask questions. If we're talking about the Jewish National Fund, so for most of us, the Jewish National Fund is kind of a holy organization that we are familiar with years and years. and they're doing good stuff in Israel. So that's the main title, but they're doing much, much more, and their job changed during the years. And if you ask me, I think that the Jewish National Fund had to be closed in right after the establishment of Israel. But since the establishment of the state, they are doing a lot of different things and a lot of corruption and a lot of giving money for the illegal settlements. And I think that people should be aware of it and start asking, what did my money do when they're donating to the Jewish National Fund? So that's about them. But I think that, as I said before, this is our future. And I think that we have to ask questions, what are we going to do with it? When Palestinian audience saw the film, it's not the whole Palestinian people, or some Palestinian people, they were quite shocked that that the younger generation in Israel is willing to talk about the history and to talk about the dark side of the history and say out loud that we did something wrong. And I think that the next, I'm not a politician, I don't know what is the solution in politics matters, but I do think that we need to acknowledge the past and start saying out loud that we did something wrong and we are sorry for it. I don't know if we can completely fix it, because the refugee problem, it's only escalated during the years. Now we're talking about almost 5 million refugees and that still don't have, they're not a citizen of any country. So the problem is bigger and bigger in every year that so I think we need to ask those questions and start thinking about our future, because this is the next step. And in every we don't have a lot of it today, but attempts to sit down to the peace table and talk about some kind of a solution. So the first subject that arises, it's 1948. And where Israelis were taught not to talk about it and not to learn about it in school, and the ruins that we see along the way, we taught not to ask questions. But on the Palestinian side, they live 1948 every day. And when you ask when you ask a Palestinian guy, where are you from? So automatically he will tell you, I'm from that and that village from 1948. It's that important for them. And for them to see that the Israeli side are not talking about it. And even we have the Nakba law that forbids them to mention their disaster. I think that's crazy, and I can totally understand their point of view, and I think we have to change it.
Thanks. I mean, so earlier you said that when Palestinians have seen the film, they're surprised that it's all out there, that you're talking about it and asking the questions. It's like you're saying the quiet part out loud. That's like kind of the language that we talk about, that dynamic here. And I want to ask you like more of like a filmmaker type question, which is, to me, there's sort of like 3 characters in this. There's the Jewish-Israeli pre-state experience, there's the Arab-Palestinian experience, and there's the American Jewish experience that are all wrapped up in this blue box. And the film, you're telling it just on the one storyline. Why?
What do you mean by one storyline?
Just so there's no Palestinians interviewed, there's no American Jews interviewed.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't think I can talk on behalf of the Palestinians. I never want to do it. I never went through what they're going through, so I cannot speak on their behalf. Second of all, I have those diaries of my great-grandfather, and I think this is very unique and authentic voice. And not every day you get to see, get to hear a testimony from the man who was there with Ben Gurion and Sharet and was at the main decision maker meetings and so I went with the diaries. A lot of people are asking me why I'm not talking about the riots in 1929 or why I'm not talking about the Intifada. So the film begins and ends with the diaries of Joseph Weits. The minute he started to write the diary until he quit and 2 years later died. And that was quite amazing for me to find out that the man went through the whole history of us. And my family and my great-grandfather managed to reflect the Israeli story. And yeah.
When my grandmother died, I was 25. It was, I guess, so 18 years ago. And we found in her house, she lived in a kibbutz that they were part of founding, in this little house for her entire life. And when she died, we opened all the drawers and all the cabinets, and we found a whole stack of my grandfather's diaries as well. He was much younger than Yosef Weits, but it was, the draining of the swamps and the planting of the trees and all of that was really familiar. And I know that many of us, my generation and younger and even older, have had that experience, that dawning realization that the trees that were planted in our names for our B'nai Mitzvot may have not been exactly what we thought they were. I certainly had that experience the first time I saw those forests in the Negev. And that sort of brings me to my last, I think what will be my last question before turning to take some questions from all of you, which is about the sort of intergenerational conversation in the film, because I think in some ways it's one of the most powerful aspects of this, because there's so much compassion and you can feel the love and kinship, and you're coming with a lot of criticism and critique, and they're uncomfortable, but you're persistent. And I also know that many of us are facing conversations with our family members or members of our community across generational divides and other kinds of divides. And I want to know what advice you have for people who are facing that in their lives. I hear it, I can't tell you how often I hear that from people in the NIF surroundings and people in my own community about just conversations with my grandkids, conversations with my parents, conversations with my former camp counselors, people really struggling to bridge those divides, which you also do in the film directly. So tell us about that part. What was it like to talk to your uncles and dads?
Wasn't easy.
No, I'm sure.
Actually, I worked on the film for 14 years. And only 3 years ago, I realized that I'm going to interview my family members. Actually, I haven't told anyone what I'm doing because I was afraid. I was afraid of the reactions and one day I understood that I have to interview them, and it was very difficult for me, but I was quite, I had a big scene with my father, and by the way, we're okay right now, and he's a big fan of the film. But it was a big surprise for me that at the beginning, they don't want to talk about it, and they trying to talk about another thing and to avoid me or stuff like that. But at the end, I discovered that I have partners to talk with. They are willing to talk about it. I guess that I tried not to be judgmental, and I try to understand what motive Joseph Weits, and I try to ask question if we had another choice by doing it or not, or to realize that because of Joseph Weits, I'm living in Tel Aviv and have a great life and everything. So I try to understand all the aspects of the story and not to be judgmental. And it was a long journey, but I think my best advice is to ask questions and don't afraid to do it, because nobody is going to eat you or bite you, and it's very important. And I feel also with my mom, for example, she really didn't want me to do this film. And we had a lot of arguments around this subject. And today, she's a really good partner to talk with about it. I think it's a different generation that was raised not to talk about it. It's for them 1948. It's kind of a taboo. And I said earlier in the panel that they were raised to say thank you for the state and shut up. And we are a different generation, and we are asking questions. And I think they are starting to understand it, and even waiting for us to ask questions.
That's so interesting. Let's involve some other voices.
Thank you very much. First, it's a wonderful documentary, and great to see the narrative that is so different from the official Israeli narrative and from your family narrative. You touch upon it a little bit in the end, but can you tell a little more about what do you think are the personality traits that you have inherited from your great-grandfather and from the other people in your family that made it possible for you to do this documentary?
Okay. Well, I think that I'm kind of like Joseph Weits. I can find me in him. I think that we both want to talk about the truth. And Joseph Weits, when you read diaries from people from that period, they really censor themselves. And you read the diaries of Ben Gurion, he really pulled out big chunks of history because he was very aware of us judging those actions one day. And I think that Joseph Weits did not try to hide. And he wrote about the harsh and difficult things in the diary, and knowing that someday someone could be very judgmental, and even I saw it once, call him war criminal and stuff like that. So he was willing to pay the price, and he wanted the truth to be out. So I can really find myself in him, trying to talk about the truth and not going with the official narrative and just shut up and don't talk about it.
Hi, Michal, first of all, here I am, Danny.
Hey!
Hi. First of all, I must say, it's not every day that you see your own brothers speaking on film.
His family from New York.
Yeah, that's my family over there. Nir, Zichrono Livracha, the late Nir, my big brother, and Yechiam #1, that's my other brother, my middle brother, and Michal is part of the family. So it's not every day that you see your family and family history. It's absolutely extraordinary experience, and not easy one. And I want to, first of all, I want to really commend you for your extraordinary courage. Because, you know, of course, inside the family, we had our discussions about the film. And you are, of course, the minority. Because we didn't agree with you. And my brothers, two of them, Nir and Ichiam, and your father, Rami. And we call each other brothers, although we have a complicated family. So it's not a direct bloodline, but we call each other brothers. And that's his credit. And so I must commend you because, as I said, in the family you're in the minority, and Yechiam, the number two, the historian, published an article. He said my grandfather was not a transferist in Haaretz. So if you want, go ahead and read it. And of course, that's the beauty of the film. When you see Yechiam number two over there, the son of Ra'anan, he's telling another story, actually. He's giving more the emotional complexity of the story. And he says, yes, it's problematic. So, you know, we can see right there in the family, within one person, Yechiam number two, which we call Yechiam HaKatan, the small Yechiam, you can see the complexity of the issue. So, first of all, I think that at the beginning of your talk, you said the most important element of your film. It's not like guilty or not guilty. That's BS. That's not the issue, because Yosef himself was not running away from the difficulty. He was confronting it because he was a great man. The real issue is, of course, your daughter, the next generation. I think that for way, way, way too long in Israel and Israel politics and the way that Israel presents itself and the way that Israel is looked at, we shy away from the real issues, and we shy away from the solutions, and we have to confront them. There's another side to it, that this is a Jewish state. And well, I happen to be an observant Jew. And a lot of what's happening in Israel is not according to Judaism. So we have to confront it. And this part of this side of the story is like totally out of the film, and it's okay. So I would say that you said it right there, that your daughter is the audience. Your daughter has to take this film and go with it. Say, what are we doing from now? And that's the real importance of the story, and the real importance of what you came out with. And Yishar Koach, I mean, you did an amazing job.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Danny.
Big hug later.
Okay. Well, I have 2 points. And first, I want to commend you again for making what to me was a very, I use the word beautiful film, because even though you show him very hard-nosed in the 30s, you also show him grappling with the questions. He was always grappling with what you call the darker side. And certainly at the end of his life, he was really aware of that. And I think you bring a real focus by distilling so much on your family. And I can only imagine that must be very difficult. But now to the second point is the problem of what do we do today? And part of that is people who will take your film and distort it.
And what?
Distort it. Use
yeah.
it against the existence of Israel. And that's something truly I do fear. So again, you know, I'm commending you. It was a moving film.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that the problem, if Israel is is not talking about what happened in 48. And I don't know how you say it in English, but in Hebrew we have the Batiana, שטומנת את הראש בחול. איך אומרים את זה?
When an ostrich hiding a head in the sand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think that could do a much more bigger damage to Israel, not talking about 1948. And so I think that I know that people can take the film and do whatever they want with him, but and I don't have any control of this. But I think that start talking about it shows that Israel is starting to be a grown-up country that knows that she's going. Here to stay, not going anywhere. But she wants to solve the problems that we have with the Palestinians and create a better future. So I think this is only on our behalf to talk about this sensitive topic.
I would even just go one step further, if you allow me, and say that so many of us have been paying special attention in recent years to Arab-Jewish partnership and celebrating when we see evidence of Palestinian citizens and Jewish citizens partnering on every level of society. And in some way, this is the conversation that takes that to the possible next level in the future. So I'll just add how important that is for what we want to see on the ground. Let's see, right here.
Hi, Michal. Thank you so much for coming, and it was a really phenomenal film. I don't know if this is really even a fair question to ask you, because I think that your work is more within Israel as an Israeli and helping to bring out these conversations and questions. But as an American Jew, certainly I think that, and this is along a similar vein to the last question, young Jews will take this and not just, they will say, okay, so then Zionism was built on racist foundations and therefore Israel shouldn't exist. And I'm wondering how, as someone who thinks that this is so critical to conversations and to part of what it means to be a Zionist Jew and to be understanding Israel and our background from a more nuanced perspective, how can we bring these narratives in a way that does that without kind of enabling people to just say, okay, so then Israel shouldn't exist, and therefore, we as Jews don't support Israel, and it should cease to exist.
I think that if someone sees this film and think that Israel shouldn't exist from the begin with, so I think that he had those thoughts before he watched the film. I don't think that the film does that job. I think, and again, I think that the film shows that Joseph Weits, he did not act from a racist motive. He just wanted to make room for the Jewish people, and like my uncle says, he did not hate the Arabs. He admired the Arabs, and he's saying that we had no chance, we had to do it. It doesn't matter if I would act differently or not, or if he's right or not, or guilty or not. It's not a question. I don't think that this film shows that Israel doesn't have the right to exist. On the opposite, and again, there are people who can take the film, and it's really beyond me what they are going to do and think about the film. But I think that a lot of people that saw the film outside of Israel until now, I never heard this kind of an opinion, and on the opposite, people told me, a lot of Jewish people that live in France, in Canada, in the United States, told me that they're a bit confused because they were raised on the Zionist narrative about the Holocaust, and we had no chance, and we have to establish the state of Israel, and the JNF and everything. And now they are a bit confused because they are seeing a different narrative, but they are still thinking that Israel has the right to exist, but Israel have to solve the problems that he has right now. Oh.
We're going to take one last question from up here.
Thank you so much. Speaking as somebody who has been of an older generation who's been asking these kinds of questions for 40 years, and I want to bring it back to the intergenerational dialogue, which for me was so moving. And I was so struck by, I don't know if it was Yechiam Misparachat or Mispashtaim who said, we're carrying a gravestone on our back. Number one. Toda. So I was wondering if, for the sake of your daughter and for the sake of all the generations, you could say a little bit about, beyond the ideology, intergenerational trauma and the healing of intergenerational trauma, and how we could use films like this as a starting point for being able to simply hear, and through the hearing, bring some of the healing through the generations.
First of all, I think to acknowledge that the other side has also traumatic past and wounds, and I think that every generation is experiencing different traumas. Again, in the panel earlier, I said that my generation experienced the Intifada and the terror attacks, and I think that we all want to live in a better place, and we have to talk about it together, because I understand the trauma that my parents went through, and with the Yom Kippur and the 6 days and everything, and I understand the older generation. My grandma lost her brother during the fight for Jerusalem in 1948. So everyone is carrying a bag of traumas, and but I think that if we don't want the next generation to carry his own bags of traumas, we have to solve it. I'm sorry, it sounds like a cliche, but we have to start talking about it, and this is a major step, and it's the easiest step to do, just to talk about it. And maybe the next step will say, we're sorry. I know it's very difficult, and I know that there are many countries around the world that it took them many years to say sorry, or to talk about what happened over their countries, like Canada, Belgium, United States. But I think that in Israel it's urgent. I cannot live in a place that every 2 years we have a war and bombs and shelters and everything. I don't want to live like that. I don't want my daughter to live this kind of life. And so it's urgent for us to talk about it. It's not only for the sake of history and the history books.
Itzi, before you take it back, I have to say to you and to Yara and the whole staff here at Other Israel, it's magnificent this year. Thank you so much. And to Carol, my dear friend and our NIF board member, you've outdone yourself. Thank you so much.
What do you mean this year?
It's always wonderful, and you've outdone yourselves this year.